Carson today. We're all here. Welcome. And
everybody.
Man, it's I was almost ready to say Happy New Year, but it seems like that was so long ago now.
Yeah, no kidding. Hey, look, Karina's on here. Hi, Karina.
Hey, Karina.
Karina and I were trading messages over the weekend. Thanks for joining us.
So, our topic today is social selling by the numbers 2023. And we had an episode last year that we did, and I think we even did a replay of social selling by the numbers. But we found a bunch of new statistics, like way more than we're going to talk about today. But some of them really jumped out. And what we wanted to do is take a look at some of these statistics that really kind of jumped out and maybe unpack them a bit, like what's behind them, what's going on with those that are there. And yeah, absolutely. We would love to have anybody who's listening jump in with questions on this, because I think this episode more than others is very engaging or warrants engaging in interaction and collaboration on that. Because it's one thing to look at a statistic and it's another to kind of look behind that statistic and find out what's actually going on. So
and the reason that the statistics are so important is because it feeds back to everything we've talked about up to this point, right? I mean, first off, it's getting grounded yourself and why adopt social selling. We have to believe in the process first and foremost. We also a lot of times have to sell leadership on why this is part of our process when it's about going out, engaging, prospecting, nurturing relationships. So that's why the statistics are so important.
Yeah, completely. And also before we start is, we've had and even after Carson, after your episode last week where you were talking about sales team, Brandon and I have had a lot of questions recently about, or maybe not questions, but more confusion about what we mean by social selling, believe it or not. And I wanted to kind of set the stage so it's really clear, because we're going to go through all these statistics that talk about social selling, but there's still a lot of confusion. And Brandon, you've seen this last week as well, that the idea of social selling is either A, I have Sales Navigator, so therefore I'm doing social selling, or B, I'm doing connections some way on LinkedIn, so therefore I'm doing social selling. Or it's like more the stuff we talk about a lot, of the pitch slapping, right? Well, I'm going out there, and that's what I think social selling is connecting and pitch slapping, right? There's still this, idea. And clearly the statistics that we're going to go through when we talk about social selling, it's really how do you use social and digital channels to build relationships, build broader sets of relationships, cover more ground, right? It's the much more holistic view of it so I really want to make sure we set the stage with that before we start throwing the term social selling around, because it's really been this week a lot. Brandon, I know a lot of this we've had.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the statistics that I looked at on this article were around that concept of how are we creating demand, or how are we building relationship, if you want to say it that way. How are we introducing ourselves to prospects in a way that's not, pitching, in a way that's not just, hey, check out our stuff. Do you want to talk?
Right.
And that's really for me. And I love, and Carson, I know you've talked to him before too. I love how Bill McCormick over the years, first of all, Bill McCormick's a great human being, but I love how he went from, being a social selling guy to using the term, hey, look, all sales are social. And that message around, we use social, for me, social selling, or social is a communication channel. And it's a very powerful channel, but how you use it determines whether you're social annoying or whether you're social networking or whether you're social selling or what you're doing with it. Just like the email message you send. And Carson, I like what you said. I like to tell people is, hey, I'm a big Manchester United fan and I have that jersey, but just because I have a jersey doesn't mean I'm one of the players, right? Just because I have a Navigator license doesn't mean I'm social selling. And so really helping everybody, I think, understand like, okay, there's this social selling thing out there, but how do I want to use this tool to achieve my goals? And going back, Carson, I love what you always say. How do I how do I do activities that increase my probability of success? And that's where I think social is such a powerful tool in supplementing all the other activities that we do.
And let's be real, social selling is modern selling. That's it. You could take the social out of it. It's leveraging
Yeah.
social tools. And it's also to complement what you just said, Brandon, very articulately, is that social selling is an information superhighway. You can, as a seller, you have to show up with value, right? You have to show up with unique value. You can't sound like everybody else. And social will enable you to stay at the pulse of your industry and your customer organizations and your prospects better than anything else, because it's information that's readily available, but not everybody's going out and finding it. And I think that's what can help you so much if you can stay at the pulse of what's happening, changes in their business, new executives, mergers, acquisitions, things that you can react and respond to. It just makes you better. And if you leverage it effectively, you're going to be first in the office. You're going to be first meeting with that new executive as opposed to the competition. So, that's the thing. I think that's where, we want to get grounded in what social selling is. But social selling is really just modern selling and using all the tools at our disposal.
I love the modern selling.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and that's, Carson, Tom and I were talking earlier this morning, and I said, when we created social selling for newbies, I had a knee-jerk reaction, and Tom and I went back and forth on this. It was like, and that's why I had the shirt for so long, social selling sucks. I hated the term because I think too many people associated with pitch slapping. And it really is, call it modern, call it hybrid, call it virtual, whatever. But I do like the term modern selling, because a modern seller is going to utilize all the tools available to them and use an omni-channel approach to use the tools that are most efficient for them. And I think as we're moving into these 2023 headwinds as well, I think that productivity and efficiency are going to be extremely important. And I believe social, when used properly, is the most efficient tool, because you can have one-to-one and one-to-many conversations all in the same tool. And you can have a lot of those simultaneous. Like, for example, what we're doing right now, we've got Adam and Karina and Susan, LinkedIn user. We got these people on here, and we're able to share information with lots of people. And this is part of a social channel. And of course, we take this and we put it onto our podcast, and we take the transcription and we create snippets and put it into other social tools. So our ability to have a one-to-many conversation in simultaneously in lots of different channels without having to do the work over and over and over again, I think is really important for customers. And our reputation as salespeople will precede us or will not exist. And when you're doing things like creating social posts, commenting on other people's social posts, sharing your thought leadership, sharing observations, going on a show, hosting a show, anything like that, it just gives you more opportunities to develop that reputation in front of the people that matter the most for you. And sales has always been about influence and who's willing to open a door, so to speak, and say, let's have a conversation. That's where I think is so important about social.
Well, let's get into some of the stats, because I think we definitely have set the stage on, when we use the word social, what we mean by that. And I think when you look at these stats through that lens, I think it puts a little bit of a different perspective on it. So the first one here is from the Aberdeen Group, and they're a pretty well-respected analyst group. And what they said is that 73% of salespeople using social selling as part of their sales process outperformed their sales peers and exceeded quota 23% more often. I know there's a lot of words there, but that's meaningful, right? That's really, and Carson, I don't know if you've seen that in your world, but you probably have definitely seen the people who are utilizing the tactics that you've been teaching are exceeding their quota or reaching their quota more often.
Well, I've shared before. Frankly, those types of statistics were the very reason why I adopted a social selling practice years ago. I think I've been pretty intentional in sharing the fact that I came to a very large tech organization with zero technology background whatsoever. On paper, there is literally no reason why I should have been successful. But in leveraging social selling tactics, I've been able to create community and be very successful, not only as an individual contributor, but also as a sales leader. And I attribute a lot of that to social selling. It also became synonymous with my brand and has helped me tremendously. Whereas to this point, I now get to train and coach social selling globally. So it's been quite a journey, but those types of statistics were the very reason that I initially adopted a social selling practice.
Exactly. And here's another one related. I'm going to kind of cover a couple of these that are more related to the seller, and then we'll talk more about the buyer side of the equation. But this one I thought was really good because it had some specifics. It's a social selling program can drive 16% better win rates, 2x pipeline, and deliver 48 larger deals. Right now, those are some pretty obviously every industry is going to be a bit different that's on there, but that's again some pretty, that's obviously based on some pretty decent research. That would be a really, really interesting one there as well. And let's see, what are some of the other ones related to sales? Just had a couple more of these. This is LinkedIn, so they may be a bit biased, but 90% of top performing salespeople now use social media as part of their sales strategy. And companies with consistent social selling processes are 40% more likely to hit revenue goals than non-social sellers. So I don't know. I mean, you can, they're all different statistics, but to me, these are like clearly, if you look at them across the board, people who are using social as part of their toolkit, as we've talked about, and as part of their strategy are performing better and more consistently than people who aren't. And not just a wee bit, but meaningfully different amounts. So let's see. But
I thought it was interesting that one of the statistics, like 68.9% use social selling tools for lead development, 64.9% use them for account research, and then call preparation, 60%. I know we've run a couple of polls on our page before. I think our audience, for the most part, believes in the viability of social selling, and just we're all at varying stages of how we leverage it. But I found that stat to be interesting because that's a lot of what we talk about. And so I think for each of those, my challenge to our audience would be, take a look at how you could leverage social for each of those types of things. Like I'll give you an example. Lead development. I'll use my sales navigator. I'll go out, I'll follow different organizations so that I can have a cultivated news feed and I can see all the things that change, like who's the new executive, what types of announcements have been made by that organization, where is that organization or that person in the news, because you can follow leads, people, you can follow organizations. To the next point of that, being able to do it for account research. You can go out and follow so much. And I'll tell you, like for a large organization, my team today, as an example, we support 20 different customers, but there's about 70 different correlating pages that are relevant. And then on top of that, I can go out and follow industry pages. I can join groups. Those types of things can really keep me at the pulse of what's happening, what's top of mind for these types of executives. And then last, call prep. So important. When you go out and you've got calls coming up with executives, being able to look at their profiles, understand not only from LinkedIn, but also from different profiles, looking at where they are from a social perspective, what articles maybe they've published or been mentioned in. All of these things can arm you with valuable intel that are going to be fodder for that conversation that can help you move the ball down the field.
Yep, totally. And all of that ties into those statistics going in the other direction. So, Brandon, anything you want to add before we jump over to the next sort of category here?
Yeah, sure. Well, one of them, and maybe I'm jumping the gun for you, but one of the ones that stood out for me too was the 31% of B2B professionals said social selling allowed them to build deeper relationships with their clients. And you know, I, look, sales we always come back to this, right? It's about being known, being liked, and being trusted is always and will always be a part of it. Unless you're selling something simple and transactional, fine. But that known, like, and trusted is always going to um, be important to that buyer seller relationship. And I like seeing that data point. And I mean, I honestly, I think that number would be and could be a lot higher. I don't know who exactly they got that data from, but social, I always go back to that. It's efficient and it's very productive when you create content and then you go and you join, as Carson was saying, you're in the groups, you're reading, you're listening, you're understanding what people are talking about, you're contributing your own thoughts and insights, you're having these digital conversations with people. This is, if we want to be a trusted advisor, then we need to put ourselves in a position where we're sharing trusted advice. And it's not just, oh, every now and then I post something. Like, we hear that a lot. Oh, I post things and nobody engages. It's making this more fluid and natural and just part of your everyday activity and being in the conversation that your customers are in.
Yeah, and it's related to that. I think Karina made a comment. I don't know if you want to pop it up here quick, Brandon, but I think what you just said fits actually what Karina was saying. In a
Which
very
one?
interesting industry, she talks about the financial advisors there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I would suspect it's not quite as easy to be a financial advisor as maybe it was a year or so ago. And so if you're going to really then, stand out in that industry as, I mean, building that relationship, building that trust is, this is
Yeah.
not just something that's for tech or for certain industries. This is really any industry where you're building relationships with customers and prospects.
Yeah. I mean, that nails it right there. I think for most industries, most products, most services, trust is so important, and it's the repetition of it. I always go back to, like, kind of the old school door knocking when I started. Everything was about repetition. It was about being in a rhythm, right? Being in front of them, being in front of them, being in front, whatever that cadence was. Is it, once a month? Was it a couple times a month? It was that consistency of seeing and being around, talking, whatever it may be, going to the same events, right? In different industries, you go year after year after year to the same shows, you start seeing the same faces. All of that is the core of selling and building that rapport and trust. What I love so much about social is you do that so much faster. It's the
Sure.
same thing. We just do it differently and it's faster. That whole efficiency thing again with me.
So, well, why? So let's move on to, we've talked about some of the statistics we're seeing just in the results, but there's some other statistics in here really talk about executives and sales teams and so forth. Carson, what's some of them that stand out to you there related, especially right, your role running sales teams and teams of people on this?
Yeah, one that I thought was really interesting was the 25% of executives say they prioritize social selling. However, only 18% of sales pros agree. So that tells me two things. One, there's a subset of executives, right, that see value in this, and maybe they're newbies, right? They're trying to explore and trying to figure out how to leverage social, and they think that it's a priority, and maybe that they think they're doing it effectively. But sales teams may disagree with the approach. And so what I find interesting, because I follow a lot of executives on social, and Kenny made a really important comment here too, because, it isn't dedicated to just one social profile, right? LinkedIn, could be Twitter, could be Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. And honestly, I'm on all of them, and all of them serve different functions for me. In my current role, I've had a lot more success with LinkedIn and getting relationships, but I've sold more books via Twitter than anything else. So who knew, right? And I think you figure these things out. We talk all the time about how your approach is going to be personal to you based on where your audience is. And so I think a lot of times with executives, you mentioned earlier, Tom, a lot of our executives probably first off might not necessarily be trained on how to effectively leverage social selling, but I think they also want to be very intentional about what is the desired output of their social platform. And I encourage executives to take this from a couple of lenses, because first off, you want this to be something that galvanizes your teams and your people. You want to post things that, obviously being cognizant that a C-level in a large organization, your people are going to be following this, your teams. And so you want to make sure that you're really, motivating them and that you're a good brand ambassador. But on the flip side of that, you also want to be very intentional about how you leverage your social platforms to engage customer executives, that you aim to support. I've seen this done really well, where executives will leverage podcasts and things of that nature, that they've, interviewed folks. They leverage social to get that material out there. They talk about partnerships that they've entered into, and they focus more on the customer as opposed to on themselves or on their own organization. And that's where I see it done really, really effectively.
Well, and I also think, we touched on this earlier, I think before we jumped on, is my guess is that executives may believe that, hey, we got Sales Navigator, right? We bought a Sales Navigator license. We must be doing social selling. And the individual contributors are like, okay, I have Sales Navigator, but now what? Right. And I think that ties into a couple of the other statistics here that were interesting, which was, was 93% of sales executives have not received any formal training on social selling. So anyway, we have a place for them to go. I mean, they could go to social selling for newbies in our community, but that's a pretty big gap when you say that 25% of executives think that we are doing social selling. My guess, again, because I have a LinkedIn Sales Navigator license or something similar.
Let me share this story too, I think, to illustrate that. And I've seen this in real life with a customer. The sales team are saying things to me of, we need to learn how to do social selling. And as I asked them what they mean by it, they were asking about, well, what's the type of content we post? What do we say if we go and engage in either groups, or we go engage with things that our prospects are doing? What do we say? How do we say it? How do we do that consistently? Like all those types of things. And then the CEO one day says to me, Brandon, I just don't, this whole social selling thing, I think it's just ridiculous. I don't believe in it. And I just don't think that we should be doing it. And I asked, okay, tell me why. And it was because he was getting bombarded with pitch slap messages inside of LinkedIn. So there's this huge disconnect when you talk about the statistics of sales leaders saying, oh yeah, we should be doing, and we do social. And then you got the executive saying, we've never been trained. There's totally different views of what actually social selling is. And I think just getting a lot of companies to come back to, and Carson, that's why I agree with you. I love the term modern selling. I do think there's some challenges there, because what's modern? But I do like that. I do like that word, because sales is always about outreach, prospecting, building some sort of rapport and relationship, and earning opportunities for conversations in a modern world.
Something I found really funny on that topic, Brandon, and it goes back to a stat that Tom read earlier. A social selling program can drive 16% better win rates, twice the pipeline, and deliver 48% larger deals. Something that's ironic to me, I've been in sales a long time. I don't consider myself to be a new seller, or, a lot of the, I kind of grew up in a call center, so I knew a lot of old school sales tactics. And then I blend that into what I've learned in the enterprise sales space over the last several years. What's interesting to me is that my team and I were able to win awards because we were driving more pipeline than anybody else, multiple years in a row through social selling tactics. And I actually had a manager a few years back that told me, you're the type of seller, you're the new type of seller. And I'm laughing at this because I've been doing sales for 23 years, but I'm the type of the new type of seller in this person's eyes. And it all feeds to the statistics. It's kind of like a doctor. who's been practicing for a long time. And guess what? If you don't adopt these new life-saving techniques, you don't adopt these new ways of increasing the probability that somebody lives, you're going to be phased out in favor of those who do. And that's why, as sellers, I'm encouraging everybody now, understand these statistics, understand these mediums at your disposal, sell yourself, sell your leadership, but you've got to adopt these things if you want to optimize your selling acumen.
You know, I put Butch's comment up here because I think it speaks to exactly what you were saying, Carson. We have to meet buyers where they are, not where we want them to be. And you being labeled oh, you're one of those new type of sellers, all that really means is you've adapted to be able to connect with buyers the way buyers behave. And that, I mean, for me, that's really the core of social selling or modern selling, whatever we're going to call it, is are you where your customers are going to be? And I think when we had Red on the show, Red was the one that said, you know, go back 200 years or 100 years where you said, you know, if you find out that all of your customers are hanging out at the pub down at the end of the dirt road, aren't you going to go hang out at the pub at the end of the dirt road? Absolutely you are. And we, you know, because of this, I mean, you see, because of our phones, right? And we are social people, even though most people are, you know, looky-loos and not creating content, which is even better for sellers to create content. But because this is where we spend so much of our time, this is a place that we have to be. And we have to go out and build community, build relationship in order to take advantage of it.
Well, I think you've just set the stage for our next set of statistics, Brandon and Butch and others there, which is looking at where the buyers, right? Where meet the buyers where they are. So here's 2 or 3 statistics I think are really amazing related to that. This is from LinkedIn as well. 90%, 90% of decision makers never answer a cold call, but 75% of B2B buyers use social media to make purchasing decisions. So if I read that, I'm like, so what that says is B2B buyers don't really use cold calls to help them buy, right? Cold calls are not an important part of that buyer journey, but social interaction and social conversations are part of that buyer journey. So talk about meeting where they are, right? There's nobody in that bar, the cold call bar, but there's definitely people in that bar about social media. If you were just talking about at the end of the road, you know, it's there.
Yeah, I think it's interesting for people to ask the question for themselves and for their industries. When a data point like that says people are using social to make decisions, play that out a little bit. Like you got to peel the onion a little bit there and go, what the heck does that mean? It doesn't mean that people just happen to go through the news feed and see somebody's, you know, brochure and go, oh my gosh, I need to go buy that. No, it's social is social. They're interacting, they're reading, they're commenting, they're learning, they're seeing what other people are talking about. I mean, think of ourselves like everybody put on your buyer hat. If you need to go buy something, what is it that you do? Do you wait for the phone to ring and go, oh my gosh, I was just thinking? No, you start paying attention to it. You start, I mean, we all know everybody's bought a new car before. When you start thinking about buying a truck as an example, and all of a sudden every truck on the road you see, like our inner person starts to like, oh, there's one. And it's the same thing when we're starting to think about tools, or we look at our industry, we start seeing and paying attention to all of it right here in our news feeds. And then we go, oh, this person said something interesting. Well, let me follow them. Or, oh, look, there's a show over here talking about this. Let me go pay attention to that. That's the way social amplifies our growth, in my opinion.
And the thing you can't control is you can't control when the buyer's ready to buy. you can only assume that they are out there looking for something in particular, or you can be listening to the voice of your customer to really figure out what is going to resonate. And so I actually wanted to kind of wrap a couple of the questions in the chat into one. So Karina, you made a fantastic question. Brandon, you made a fantastic question in the chat. Be really intentional about thinking about, first off, it's really easy for anybody to go out and be on social. Okay. I mean, one of the statistics is just how many people are out there. I mean, there's billions of people that are out on social media, right? So not everybody's selling something, not everybody's buying something right this second. However, if you're very intentional about using these things in order to go out and create relationships, do the social listening, understand what your potential buyer is saying and thinking, and you're using it in a way that isn't stuck in a vacuum. Karina, I love the way you summarize this, because I've noticed this too. If you work for an organization, and I see this in my company, I see this in other companies, you make a post about your own company, a lot, like 99% of the likes are people that work at the exact same company. So it doesn't do me any good to go out and see how great my company is on social media, because it doesn't mean somebody's just going to immediately send me a PO to my LinkedIn inbox, right? But what it can do is, what I've found works, you have a success with a client, and then you get their permission to post about that success, what made them great. Guess what? That is going to make that customer organization that you're working with, that the majority of the likes might actually come from that customer organization, and other organizations that are following that organization or competitors of that organization are going to see what you're posting and talking about. So do it in a meaningful way that isn't all about bringing attention to yourself or your company, but doing it in a way where you're sending connection requests, you're asking for meetings, you're showing up with intel that's valuable. So that's where maybe you're using your marketing material in a meaningful way for a niche audience. And then you're posting about your customers' successes, not just about yourself and your company.
I love it, Carson. And Carson, I love listening to you talk about this. Here's, for everybody listening and podcast live, whatever, look, do something like this. Have a conversation with one of your prospects and take one of their questions that they ask you, just, write it down during the conversation. Come back later and write a post about that question.
Yes.
Right? Just simple as that. You can use their title and maybe their industry. You don't have to use their name. And then answer the question, or say 2 or 3 things that are important about that question for the industry. And then here's a great, simple, easy way to add value and be able to communicate with your prospects in a non-pitchy way. Share that message, share that post with them, and tell them why you're sharing it. Right. And this is why I think this is so important. And you guys know, nothing has changed, it's just different. That's the same version. If you're in a room or you're at a conference and you're having a conversation with someone, they ask you a question, you have a great conversation. And then 2 minutes later, 20 minutes later, whatever, you're talking to someone else and they go to say the same thing or something on the topic. You go, oh my gosh, I was just talking to Carson over here, and what we talked about is this, and you start sharing information with them. Right? That's all we need to do sometimes with social, to use social as that exponential tool.
Completely.
Love that. Kelly agrees with you, Brandon, and we got to put David's comment up there.
You got it.
I
haven't read it yet. I was talking.
Use social selling as a different medium for them to apply existing successful sales skills. Social selling doesn't replace any component of sales. It gives you a higher probability to maybe get that first touch, get that first meeting, stay at top of mind with your clients as they see you in their feed, or that you engage them in real time or on something you saw on social that resonates or harks back to a conversation you previously had with that prospect. As a successful seller, you've got to pick all of your mediums. I never discriminate against any possible way to go out and unlock a door, have valuable intelligence, have a customer meeting, and then stay top of mind with my clients. And that's the thing. That's why it's so integral to sales today, but it doesn't replace any of the old traditional things. You still have to prospect. You still have to do a needs analysis. You still have to do a SWOT analysis. You still have to do the selling, do the negotiation. You have to invest in the relationship, but social makes you more effective, period.
I love it. Nothing has changed. It's just different. That's David. that's what I love to say, and I love the way he said it.
Well, and just to wrap up here with a couple of, final statistics related to that, right, which we were just talking about, is 77% of B2B buyers said they did not talk with a salesperson until after they had performed independent research, right? I think that's even growing. I could see that being higher and higher as we go along, right, along the way. So,
well, in the Gartner data that I've read over the years, and I believe it was in 2015 when I first saw this, and it was like 30 some percent, like low 30s, 32%. They said buyers did 32%, if that was the right number, of their research before talking to a salesperson. And now here we are, 2022 data. I know we're in 2023, but 2022 data was up at like 72%.
yeah.
I mean, what does that mean for us as sales reps? They don't want to talk to us. They're getting their information in other places. They're doing their research on their own. And if you're not making yourself available to be a data point when and how they're doing their research, you're going to get bypassed. And you can't rely on your marketing department to do it, because all of us, flip the switch again on your buyer hat on. We're really good at filtering out sales messages.
Well, and I think related to that, this last statistic, because even if you're out we've just talked about commenting, posting, whatever, and you're starting to be visible. This last one here, 92% of buyers say they delete emails or voicemail messages when they come from someone they do not know. Now, if they knew who you were or had some visibility of who you were, and you send them an email, I'm not saying you are going to get a response, but your probability, Carson, goes up, as you talked about, right? Oh yeah, I saw Carson. That was a great post. That was a great dance he did on TikTok. I saw him yesterday. I want to reply to that guy, right?
How did you know I got that message today?
Well, I saw the dance, so I figured I got a few of those.
See, and that's, for everyone to remember, like our reputations, we can control our digital influence, if you will. The more active we are, the more content we're sharing, the more other posts we're commenting on inside the industry, our faces and our names get seen by more people, and it increases, Carson, to borrow that, increases the probability of success that somebody's going to reply to the email or return the call or accept the call, because they go, oh, I know that guy. I know that person. It's the efficiency factor for me, as I keep going back to.
I'm going to give you one last statistic. It's the percentage of sellers that should be leveraging social. It's 100. Couldn't resist.
Mike Trott.
Carson at Microsoft. All right, we got. So here, if I were to distill all of this, tell me if you agree with me. What I'm hearing out of all these statistics, right? The people, the sales team, sales individuals, sales contributors that are using this are obviously getting better results. So that's a given. However, management and executives and sales management, there's still a bit of a disconnect between what is perceived as social selling and what is actually happening. And there's not a lot of training. There's not I think Karina asked a question, right? Is who is, then who is training all these people with all these social media roles and all these things that are out there? I think there's a big gap. Obviously, that's why we're here. Obviously, why we're doing the community that we're going to be expanding on, right? There's obviously a lot of blue ocean for helping to understand this topic that's here. But I think there's some clear disconnect. And then the third thing, as we just went through, is that all of this is being driven by the buyer, right? So, and by the buyer journey, the buyer experience, the way buyers want to buy. So you kind of take all of those things and put them together. And those are what, to me, those statistics tell that story, right? We do better. We need to get better on our sales teams and how we train and how we disconnect, but we better move fast because our buyer is pulling us in that direction, and we're not going back to the old way of doing it.
Yeah, the buyer hasn't pulled us in that direction, in my opinion. The buyer's gone their own direction.
Maybe
and
true.
As a seller, if we don't figure out
behind.
where they are, we're just going to be wandering in the desert trying to figure out why we have no closes.
Good point. Good point. Yeah. All right. Well, some really good conversation. Any final thoughts before we end off today?
I didn't want to quit today. This was good.
The numbers don't lie. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Numbers don't lie.
Yeah, and everybody on the live, I'm going to forget people, but Kelly and David and Susan and Adam and Butch and Brandon and everyone else was there. Hey, thank you so much for contributing and adding to this. Keep the questions. I mean, if you're here, you're probably connected to one of us or all of us, and shoot us messages and tell us which topics, what's important, what do you need to know, what do you want to talk about. We don't know everything. We know some things, usually through trial and error and lots of bloody knees from the process. And for everybody on the podcast, if you're listening, thank you so much for listening. Tom's been doing our data. Our downloads keep going up. That's been pretty fun to see. But you can connect with us on LinkedIn. I think we put our links down in the show notes. And pop us those questions and let us know what the right topics are. Let us know what your team or you are struggling with, and let's get those discussed. Like, our goal in here is to help everybody level up and learn as a community how we can, to use Carson again, how we can increase our probability for success.
And if you need somebody to present to or train your executives, just give us a call.
Hey, look at us. We've never pitched. We've never pitched for our stuff before.
Hey, we believe in this
stuff.
We believe in this stuff. I have a lot of, just one-off conversations with folks around this stuff, because I always like to say I'm always learning, right? I mean, we take on new tactics, new tools. I took on new social tools just over the last few months that I've started leveraging. And, you pick some that you might want to favor, that you bring into the arsenal. You might try something and maybe it's not a fit right out of the gate. But, I think that's the key thing, is that we're all always learning.
You've just foreshadowed a future episode, Carson's Toolkit.
I made a post on that recently, and it was really well received. I thought it was cool because it was kind of a conversation starter. I was looking for people to kind of share what was in their toolkit, and I shared what was in mine, and it was really, really well received. It was cool.
Yeah, well, we all want to know, right? And we have the next couple of weeks. I think we have guests. We have some pretty good guests coming up over the next 2 or 3 weeks. But I think our next one we will do, that we're just the three of us, will be Carson's Toolkit. Thank you for that. So
awesome.
Well, I don't know if I don't know. I haven't paid attention to our schedule, who our guests were over the next few weeks, but man, our guest last week is really going to be hard to beat.
Brandon Lee, right?
Yeah.
That was you.
Well, it sets a bar that we have to achieve. So, all right.
That is very true.
Well, thanks everybody. Good session. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week.
Until next time, happy social selling.